Ibsen. I'm with the Danish Center for Social Science Research called VIVE. I'm one of the organizers of the webinar series, Udsatte børn og unge i Norden. The other organizers are Mette Lausten, Anne Dorte Hesbæk, and Hans Skov Klokkenborg. And our communications officer, Swiss Army Knife, is Michelle Mean Petersen. Welcome. My task in the next 5 to 8 minutes is to just walk you through the program, which is here, and talk a little bit about why we're here and some practicalities of how we're going to be here. And then I'm going to bid Taya a proper welcome. So the main event for today, of course, is Taya's talk, which will start in a bit by Taya Pøsø, professor of Tampere University. And after Taya's talk, which will last for about 35 minutes, we'll have a Q&A, question and answer session, or you can also make comments. And you do that in the chat function. So you just write along the way. And I'll try to collect and bundle the questions and comments in a meaningful way and put them to Taya. And if I find difficulties in translating or bundling the questions, then I might just ask you as a questioner to put the question yourself. But we think it works more easily and smoothly if I just put the question. Okay. You just choose whatever language you prefer among the Nordic languages. We should be able to translate that. I'm not so strong in Finnish, so maybe you should try English on that. At about 3 p.m., we'll round up the Q&A session, and we'll have a short break where you can either just say thank you for today, or you can stay on and take a bio break, but then come back for a breakout session where you can have an informal chat with other participants at today's event. And then at 3:30, we'll warp people back to this a main room that we're in now, and just say thank you for today, and thank you for spending time with us. So that's the program. The webinar series is the third. This webinar today is the third in the series. You can find information about the other webinars at VIVE's events website. Go check that out. And we'll have the fourth in May also. But today's talk is by Taya, of course. The other day, Taya sent me a paper with a more historical perspective on today's topic. It was an article on Nordisk samarbete for barnets bästa. It was about some Nordic conferences that were held between 1920 and at the beginning of the 1970s, which was an arena for exchanging experiences, ideas, and perspectives across the Nordic countries with respect to child protection. So in that series of conferences in 1936, for example, the 5th conference was held here in Copenhagen. Hundreds of people attended from all over across the Nordic countries. They made study visits to institutions for caretaking for children, and they had social gatherings and even ceremonies as well. And well, of course, the reason that Taya sent me that article was that this is the same thing that we're after today. So what they traveled quite a long distance for back then, that's the same thing that we're doing today, just by the click of a hand. We're trying to exchange experiences, ideas, and perspectives. And today it's about experiences and perspectives from Finland. I shouldn't get too lyrical about this strange space that we're in, but it's also quite fantastic that we can be so many people that could just take part in this kind of event. So I'll just say a bit about the norms or the practicalities of today. It's a different way of being together than the physical presence of earlier times. So the practicalities for this kind of being together are as follows. We have a recording of Tarja's presentation that will be shared at VIVE.DK after the webinar. You can see that along with the others, if you will, and you can send the link to your colleagues. Another thing is put your camera on, please, if you're not sort of doing the dishes or you're in the car or something like that. It's as a courtesy to our speaker and to the other participants. It's nice to get a sense that there are actual people out there. You're not speaking into black space. So unless you're doing the dishes or are in your underwear or something, put your camera on. Then the microphone, put that off during the talk and also during the Q&A session. You should use speaker view in Zoom, this program that we're using. During Tarja's talk, it's better that way for you. And please ask questions and make comments along the way, as you please. Use only the chat function to put questions and comments. And I'll try to pass them on to Tarja and bundle them, as I said before. If you have any technical issues, you just send a private chat message to Michelle. Okay. And that's basically it for the main part of today's event. We have the breakout session, which is sort of a special. It's you should imagine it to be like if you're at a traditional seminar and you get a chance to hang out a bit afterwards and chat with someone. And then you're put inside a room and then you just chat along. You listen to each other's perspectives. What did you think about today's talk? What are your thoughts about it? That's basically what it's about. And you can choose not to join that room, but you can also choose to join it. And that's what you get. So just stay in the meeting and we'll allocate you to a group. There is a chairperson there. It's either a Mette and a Dorte or Katrine Iversen or myself. We'll be there and we'll just help the chatting along, facilitate a bit. So it's about sharing thoughts and perspectives. And that's about it from me. We're very happy to have Tarja talk for us today, and we're looking forward to this event. Welcome. And I'll just stop sharing and over to you, Tarja.
Thank you very much. This is not my first digital meeting today, but this is the first meeting when the line is very poor. And I hope that you can hear me all right. But the good point is that if the link fails, I don't promise to sing Danish songs for you, so while I try to reconnect again. So let us hope that the connection remains good, and I hope that you will inform me when the line becomes very weak. So let's start from here. The task given to me to talk about child protection in Finland and its recent trends in policy debate, support systems and legislation is of course a very challenging task to talk about. And 35 minutes is not a long time to address all possible issues, but I do my best. And I start by locating the Finnish child welfare in the way how it's done nowadays, and it is to put it into comparative contexts. It might be very familiar to all of you that in the cross-country comparative debate, child welfare is seen as systems which is oriented towards family service and child-centeredness. And this orientation has been very clear in Finnish child welfare since its second Child Welfare Act was introduced in 1983. And then that time it was the child's best interest and the emphasis on in-home services which was somehow the line which was taken that time, and which is very obvious still at the moment. And in comparative context, the Finnish child welfare is also typically seen as being one of the Nordic child welfare systems, which they all, as you know, they are oriented towards family services and children's rights. But what the message is when one speaks about Nordic child welfare systems is that the child protection systems are located in the welfare state systems. And it's not only the child protection services which matter, but also other services, universal services and benefits which influence how children and families are
Taya, I'm sorry. I think Taya, this wasn't part of the plan, but as you said, we should say if the sound is not so good. I think I'm getting some messages
yes.
for some viewers that the sound is not so good. So if you could maybe try to log off and then on a bit, and then meanwhile I'll try to find the reference for the article that I just mentioned.
Okay, let us do that.
Please, and you're still on for the 35 minutes. We'll just hope it goes that way. Okay, sorry for that.
Let us try that. So another try. Let us see how it will be now. So I continue. Yep, good. So I was somehow trying to locate Finland within the other Nordic countries, and even in the sort of cross-country comparisons, we are seen as being similar, but of course we aren't that similar at the end. And a recent, very fascinating study is by Elin Hultman and her colleagues describing these decision-making systems and their differences. And they remark that the Finnish decision-making system is professionalized. And this is a remark which I will come back to later. And even one is so tempted to talk about these system characteristics and locations in wider comparative contexts. One has to remember that these categorizations are normally typically based on reading legislation and policy aims. And child protection practices are they don't match with and characteristics. They say that the child protection system is much more complex than just being services for families or just being child-centered. And I now try to describe you some of its recent characteristics. And as I said, 35 minutes is not much to summarize the present intense, very, very intense interest in child protection. We read about child protection almost daily in the media. We have a variety of legislative changes addressing child protection. Our last Child Welfare Act was introduced in 2007, but ever since it has been changed almost yearly, or if not even more often. Some paragraphs have been changed. We have national and local policy programs running all the time, and a wide range of national and local development projects. So there's a lot of happening. And how could one summarize all this intense interest? I decided to summarize it in one word, and that's confusion. I claim, as a social work researcher who has been following this field for some years, that the most prominent trend at the moment is confusion about the role and tasks of child protection in Finland. And this confusion deals about three topics in particular. It is what is and what is not child protection. This is very much the line between the services given by the Child Welfare Act and the services given by the Social Welfare Act. I will explain later in more detail. There's confusion what the role of child protection is for teenagers. There's current legislation and other issues going on. And there's wide confusion about the relevant knowledge in child protection. What are the relevant ways to know about child protection and to work in child protection, to promote change in child protection? I'm certain that some of my colleagues could add a lot of other topics of confusion, but I somehow tried to tell you something about these three confusion topics. First, about the question, what is and what is not child protection in Finland at the moment. The general view is that the less child protection there is, the better. And that is why we, in many policy programs, have the emphasis that early prevention and preventative services should be prioritized, and there should be more emphasis on them in order to avoid child protection services. And this claim has been very much supported by the growing numbers of children receiving child protection services. The number has been increasing since the mid-1990s. And the number has been high. We had a new Social Welfare Act introduced in 2015, which introduced a new approach to family services. It has the concept services to families with children, and those services should be given on low threshold, close to everyday life of families, multi-professionally, and without any registration in child protection. The impact of the new legislation was reflected in a dramatic decline of new registrations of children in the child protection system. When in 2014, there were 7.5% of children under the age of 18 receiving in-home services. In 2016, the number was already 4.6. So in a way, it's somehow sounded like a success. The new model of providing services was reflected in smaller numbers of children in the child protection system. The field of child protection was, however, a bit sort of troubled because there wasn't any clear understanding of what the difference between the services and service criteria were. What was the service? What was family work? How was family work different when it was provided by the Social Welfare Act from the service which was provided by the Child Welfare Act? Because Child Welfare Act still has that emphasis on in-home services, and the same services were provided under both legislation. There was a lot of confusion about the assessment tools, which meant that more and more attention was given to assessment. There was more and more interest in creating procedural guidelines for assessing children and families, both in the services for families to families and children and in Child Welfare Act. And interestingly enough, when we had the latest national statistics of child welfare presented in 2019, so the main headline in that statistic, the key message was this: never before have there been so many children and young people in emergency placements, in care, or in other types of placement as in 2019. So there was this decline in children receiving in-home services, but an increase in the number of children being in out-of-home care. And there's obviously a dilemma here, that the policy is that child protection is best when it is at its smallest. And the attempts to decrease its role in the service system has resulted in increasing the numbers of children in out-of-home care in child protection. And this, for me, informs that the border between child protection and other services, family services, education, healthcare, is far from being clear or settled. And this has something to do with child protection working in the middle of other services of the welfare state. And there's still obviously the tendency that child protection deals with issues which other services do not manage or do not want to work with. And that's how the children end up in out-of-home care. That was the confusion number one. What is child protection and what is not? My other topic about confusion was the question what the role of child protection is for teenagers. And that introduces the topic of residential care in particular. Teenagers challenge the present child protection and residential care in particular. They have always challenged the child welfare systems. I mean, if you look at the history of those child welfare conferences, you see that it's a lot about teenagers. And if we read the history of Finnish child welfare, it has always been a lot about teenagers. Teenagers somehow are not somehow are not so unproblematic from the point of view of child protection system. But at the moment, they challenge the system for a couple of reasons. They are in very high numbers in entering and being in the system. They challenge the methods and measures used in child protection. It's especially emergency placements, which are very much needed for teenagers. There's also the concern about aftercare services. That was one of the recent changes in legislation, that now we provide aftercare services to children up to the age of 25. There's concerns about the outcome of child protection, especially with those young people who have entered care in their teenage years. Their outcomes seem to be more problematic than those the outcome of those children who entered care earlier. And recently, the parliamentary ombudsman has pointed out several violations of children's rights in residential care, and they are especially violations of children's rights of teenagers. So this has resulted in many suggestions to improve the situation. In 2020, there was a major report of research-based practices for taking care of teenagers. It was published, and it's a very thick book. And what I can only mention here now is that at the end of the thick book, the conclusions and recommendations stretch over 23 pages. So obviously there isn't any easy solutions if you need 23 pages to do that. And they request both general measures for teenagers, but also they propose changes in substitute care, such as trauma-based methods and art-based methods and things like that. Also in 2020, there's a reform of child welfare legislation proposed, government proposal, which aims to introduce quite a new type of thinking of residential care for young people. So it introduces several classifications of residential care, different types. It also specifies restrictive measures and special care. And it also includes a lot of new legal norms about practices in residential care. And somehow what the confusion is very much about is how to think about young people's problems, their needs and rights. Traditionally, they were seen as being asocial children and young people, but now they are increasingly seen as young people with psychiatric or neuropsychological issues. And that's how the border between child protection and mental health care has become very problematic and very much at the end agenda. There's also the issue of individual rights of children and young people in care settings, which is challenged by the care settings which traditionally have looked at young people as members of groups. And this is a challenge which, if you look at the parliamentary ombudsman's reports, for example, there's that clash between individual rights and the treatment methods of residential care. There's also the challenge caused by the new frames to approach teenage behavior. What we have always seen in residential care, also in those reports, the history reports about child welfare conferences in the Nordic countries, there has always been young people running away from institutions. But one of the new frames to address that issue nowadays is human trafficking. And if you address it as a form of human trafficking, you need different measures.
Excuse me, Taya, can you take off your video perhaps, so your sound gets maybe a bit more bandwidth? Sorry.
Something happened?
I just think maybe you should try to take off your video, but the sharing screen is worked well. But your sound went out just briefly.
Okay.
My own sound was good until this about the human trafficking.
Okay. You still hear me? Good. And it is the idea that there are these sort of issues in youth which challenge the child protection system, and my anticipation is that there will be even further issues challenging the system, and some of them will be created by the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, in general, but especially those children and young people who are in the care settings at the moment, because there's quite a lot of new types of uncertainties in their lives. And what the topic so far has been is about digital inequalities between the people in child protection and in residential care. The notion that children who are placed in care might have differently access to education, to therapy, as provided at the moment through digital tools. And this might be reflected in the coming months or years in new types of inequalities and vulnerabilities. So this confusion will not be over in the near future. And still shortly about the third confusion at the moment, which is about the knowledge embedded in child protection and suggested to be used in use in child protection. For a long time, child protection has been the domain of professional social work. But not only professional social work, because it has always functioned in multi-professional networks of the service system. It has functioned within the public administration system, and it has been based on law, especially on public law. It has worked with NGOs and voluntary work, and with sort of lay people. If you think that foster care, for example, is provided by lay people. But at the moment, this knowledge base is very widely debated. And I list a couple of tensions which exist. Social workers, they have to be licensed now in Finland. You might know that to become a social worker, you have to have a 5-year university degree, and you have to be licensed before you can function as a qualified social worker. And that's quite a new practice in Finland. But now, for those who work in child protection, there's the sort of claim that the knowledge base should be changed. It should be expanded towards more relationship-based and systemic approaches. There's more emphasis on somehow claims for family therapeutic orientations and more practice skills to work with children in particular. So it's more like quite a sort of therapeutic orientation required in one sense. There's also quite a strong call for service user participation, which should be a very integral element of the knowledge base. And this means that experiential knowledge of experts of experience, those of children in particular, is given a high role in knowledge base, and different sort of ways how the municipalities should develop their practices and so on. But at the same time, there's this sort of service user emphasis and therapeutic emphasis. There's also an emphasis that social workers should have a more prominent role in supervising the quality of services, especially because there are so many for-profit services and their quality is up to the social workers to assess when they provide the services to children and families. They should report shortcomings in the services and they should promote structural social change. So quite a sort of different expectations. There's also expectations that there should be more integrated multi-professional platforms for professionals and much more information exchange between different practitioners. Legislation is said to be that social workers should be more aware of the different elements of legislation, and human rights, of course, children's rights in particular, should guide their professional practice. And this is the frame how the quality of practices should be assessed, how well they follow legal regulations and human rights. Research-based practice has also been suggested, including evidence-based methods, but maybe not very strongly. These other orientations are stronger. And this means that the wide notions of relevant knowledge challenge the ways how child protection is talked about and assessed. You see, you can assess it as a therapeutic service, or you can assess it as whether it's legally correct, or whether it meets the experiences of the service users. And this creates quite a sort of hybridity for the knowledge base, and quite a lot of confusion. And finally, the concluding remarks is to say that, as you possibly have heard already, that the current confusion about the role and task of child protection takes many forms and it takes many directions. The debate is such that more attention is given to the ill-functioning elements than the well-functioning elements of child protection. That's often the case, but it becomes very prominent when the debate is as intense as it is at the moment. The motives for these intense changes and debates are a mixture. There's the motive to acknowledge children's individual rights more than have been done before, but there's also the concern about the high social and economic investments child protection takes in our society. And to be honest, I don't know what the next steps will be about. I mean, this sort of this diversity of topics and emphasis can take us, I could say, wherever. And that's why I think it's very nice to see what the years will bring us and how similar we are to other Nordic countries, and what directions are similar and which directions will be different. So this is the references I mentioned, this report about the treatment working with young people. So it's only in Finnish, but there's a wide several pages summary in English. And this is the fascinating study about our differences, the differences in our decision-making systems. So thank you. I hope you heard some of it.